Welcome, horror lovers, to I Know What You Watched Last Week, episode 32.
32.
Yeah, you never remember the numbers. And John's not too happy with the movies we watched this week.
Or am I ever?
No.
No. But I was more certain that I wouldn't like them because against my better judgment, I picked 3 modern movies, all from last year, 2024. And let me just be clear, when we started to do this, I Know What You Watched Last Week, in between, getting Heathen made, the idea wasn't to just come to camera and just trash every single movie that we watch, but unfortunately, 90% of the time, we're left with no option but to do that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be somewhat the same.
And I just want to
with these newer
clarify again, it's our opinion. It's an opinion, and everyone's allowed
Fact.
them, and everyone's allowed to express them.
Fact.
And I have to agree, these 3 films were, I mean, they range from boring to just nonsensical. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so this was my list because we both kind of had the same idea. Let's watch some more modern movies, and there were 3 lined up on streaming, so I put those together. You wanted to do a couple of different ones which were newer, like Nosferatu, which is actually from this year. But we've gone with these.
Yeah.
2 are especially well known. 1 I'm not entirely sure, but I think it came out around. It was actually, I think,
according to the box office, I don't think it is very well known.
Yeah, and the other one was Paramount's Halloween release. Yeah. So what were they? Let's put everyone out of their misery and let them know what we wasted our time with watching.
We started the week with Immaculate.
Yeah.
And we moved on to Longlegs.
Mm-hmm. Very long legs.
And we finished it all off with...
You're a bit of a long legs.
with the only one of the 3 I hadn't heard of, Bloodline Killer.
Bloodline Killer.
Yeah.
What's your order? Third place to top.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge for a couple of them because, unfortunately, there was no clear winner for me.
There was a clear winner for me.
Was there?
And the other 2 are just... and yeah.
Well, I definitely put Bloodline Killer as dead last.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in second place, I'll probably go with Longlegs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll put Immaculate in first place.
I have it in exactly the same order. This is becoming a running theme now, me and you putting our movies in the same order. Yeah, I've got exactly the same. Dead last. Although, when I say dead last, I almost put Bloodline Killer top just for giggles. As in, it was so laughable.
Got the most reaction out of us.
Yeah.
Although, actually, Longlegs made me laugh as well. Just not you.
Yeah, a couple of parts were funny, I guess, but it wasn't as funny as Bloodline Killer. That was hilarious. That was truly a hilarious movie.
And in our usual fashion, we might as well go straight into Bloodline Killer because we normally start with our last place pick. And, I mean...
Do you want to start? I'll just consult my trusty notes.
I have so much going on in my head about this one. So this week, instead of writing notes during the film, I watched the movie, and then at the end, I wrote down my sort of overriding thoughts or feelings. And the other 2 films, it was quite short. How does it make me feel? And this one...
What emotions did it bring to the surface?
This one I could have gone on for ages, and it was... The ending might be one of the least
Someone's not happy.
Satisfying endings I've ever seen. And I can only assume this must have been quite low budget. I can't find any information anywhere. But considering
I don't think it was low budget. You've got Tyrese Gibson from the Fast and the Furious franchise. He's also a bit of a crooner. And Shawnee Smith's in it. Who was the other guy? Bruce Dern. Bruce Dern is the therapist. He's in it. So,
yeah, but you've also got one of the...
It didn't look... Things, it didn't look inept or anything. It didn't look bad. It was just whatever.
It was
what was going on the screen.
The script was abysmal. The script was abysmal. It made no sense. When you're watching a film and you think, oh, okay, so they've shown this. They've spent some time showing us this like interaction or this situation or whatever it might be. I'll log that because surely that's going to come back into the story later. No. Absolutely not.
It was written by two very special boys.
One of them
The
is in
Gaudisio
it,
twins.
Which
Yeah,
I was going to try and say when you were saying who's in it. I said because one of the
James.
writers has put himself in it as the son called Connor.
Yeah, he plays Shawnee Smith's son, even though
Okay.
I think he's about 4 years younger, it looks, than Shawnee Smith.
I think we have to start at the beginning of
Let's start
the
at the beginning.
main story. So we have a like intro beginning thing where it kind of shows clippings and flashes things in to try and give a sort of history to our killer.
That was a
person.
really bad clippings.
It was terrible.
Yeah, that was not cool.
And it didn't really say anything.
Normally I like some newspaper clipping stuff, but this wasn't newspapers, was it? It was just a made-up
was
spreadsheet
strange.
or
The
something
only
like that.
thing that I really got from this was that Moira, played by Shawnee, was a survivor of this killer, and they were making a movie
Skeleton.
like Stab in Scream. So yeah, so that's the only real thing I got from this clipping. It was hard to tell even like what time this was supposed to be in as well, but then we get to the main story in the house on Halloween, and there's two men. There's two grown men sitting at a table.
Well, a father and a man-child, it turns out.
I was going to get to that. So there's
Yeah.
two grown men, and yeah, one of them we find out apparently is the dad of the other one, and
He's answering the door to the trick-or-treaters dressed as
I
Dracula.
actually, because I thought maybe we were being unfair because we kept laughing at this guy. So this was the writer.
Well, I started laughing.
The character's called Connor, this son, and
The writer. He's written
yeah,
this movie.
That's
yeah.
what I just said.
Yeah, I just want to clarify it.
And he's like studying for some big test,
I got a big test tomorrow, Dad. I got to study.
and
He's like 49.
I found out that he is a few years older than you in real life. This guy, yeah. So he was in his 40s when they filmed this. Yeah, like 44 maybe or something.
Well, he clearly looks it.
And then we find out that Shawnee's his mum. Yeah.
Shawnee Smith can't be much older than she can't. Is she 50 yet?
I have no idea how old Shawnee is, but she looked really good
She
actually.
looked great.
Yeah, I think this might
It's that
be...
fringe.
Yeah, the hair was
it's the fringe.
great.
The fringe was looking fantastic.
And actually, I think this might be one of my favourite performances of hers. She was
Obviously, we see her in
the
loads of
one
things because she's a
saving
horror
grace.
chick.
Yeah,
you know,
she is. Yeah, but sometimes her characters I find a bit frustrating. But this
Yeah.
one was, I think, probably my favourite. She's my favourite. But again, we're just going to continue on this thing of this guy in his 40s.
Studying for his test.
And he's got a brother as well, so there's two sons.
But wait, are you going to skip ahead of the whole intro bit of him sitting at the table with his dad first? Because once again, you're skipping over important
I just
stuff.
wanted to say
When-
one more hilarious thing about his age.
in
but okay.
in the beginning, when Mr. Gaudisio, Connor is his name, right?
The character,
Connor
yeah.
is sitting at the table with his dad, and his dad is answering the door to trick-or-treaters dressed as Dracula, and he's goofing around, and then coming back and sitting at the
I like
table.
the dad as
Yeah, I
well.
like the dad. I actually liked it when it first started after the rubbish clippings, and the dad came in. I thought, okay, this might be all right. When Connor then started to speak his dialogue, saying that he's got a big test tomorrow and stuff like this, I was like, well, what kind of test? Because this guy looks, like you said, like about 45 years old. Is he supposed to be in college? What is this? And then his dad goes and answers the door again, some trick-or-treaters. But instead of opening the door and then his son hearing his dad talking to the trick-or-treaters as Dracula...
You hear the door open, by the way, but no
he's
dialogue.
silent and there's no dialogue. So then the son, Connor, starts going, Dad? Dad?
Close the door!
It's getting cold, Dad. And he walks out, and obviously his dad, he jumps out and he scares him. And he's like, oh, you got me, Dad, but seriously, I gotta prepare for my test. Then he goes back and sits down, and Dad's about to give up. He's about to take off his Dracula suit or whatever, but then there's another doorbell ring. So Dad gets up, he's like, one more time, I'm gonna go and, treat these trick-or-treaters. And the same thing happens again. It opens the door, and then we hear nothing. And that's when he starts going, Dad, I'm not gonna fall for it again, Dad. And he walks out there, and his dad is in trouble with this. I was about to call him Skeletor,
Skeleton, yeah.
Yeah, and that was really the first thing that I was actually laughing out loud at the dialogue of Dad, I'm not gonna fall for it again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we see Skeleton offing the dad.
Skeleton, I don't know how much thought has gone into the Skeleton's outfit, because what he's wearing is a long sleeve black t-shirt with some child's overalls and what looks like Jason X's enhanced mask, but nowhere near as good in the style of a skull.
Yeah.
And you can see his perfectly great haircut behind, because there's no back to the mask either.
He's definitely going to the barbers once a week. And Connor tries to sort of intervene and save his dad. He's unsuccessful, and it ends up being Shawnee, aka character Moira, who comes out with a gun and is all like, bam, bam, bam. And she does hit Skeleton.
Skeleton.
I keep wanting to say Skeletor as well. Yeah. Does hit Skeleton. And
I'll be back, He-Man.
And Skeleton ends up sort of, disappearing into the darkness. And we've got a couple of things now, because we follow along kind of what's happening to Skeleton in the film, as well as what's happening to the family. I don't remember their surname, but you know who we mean. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say one more thing on the family and the son in his 40s, who, by the way, along with his brother, in his 40s, who I assume they're similar age.
They gotta be, yeah.
They both still live at home, and they're like, we get that thing 1 year later, and Moira goes up to her son Connor's room.
After Connor's father's been murdered, then it goes to 1 year later, yeah.
And she goes up to his room, and he's in bed, and
he's sulking because his dad's dead.
Yeah, and she's like, you've got to get up. Just come down, and I'll help you make your bed. I'll make you some breakfast. And he's like, I don't want to make my bed. I don't want to get up. I don't want to have breakfast. And it's just, it's like, honestly, it's so baffling seeing this grown ass man being like, I don't want to make my bed, Mom. It's like, what is happening?
Before we skip 1 year ahead as well, we have a scene where the two brothers are in the hospital after their father's been murdered. And Connor's already there. Then his brother comes in, and there seems to be some beef between them. And essentially, then they then start blaming each other for their father's death. And they're like, they're essentially like having a fight like this, aren't they? And it's all dramatic. And again, I was laughing because this was.
So there's nothing clear. Okay, I think it is mentioned in the story at points that they're essentially living off the dad's life insurance, but still, I'm like, these two grown men
and royalty checks from the Skeleton movie.
Yeah. But these two grown men, they don't seem to have a job or anything. I mean, the other brother, not Connor. I've forgotten his name, but anyway, he does seem to... He rekindles a relationship, essentially, and
with his ice queen.
So there's, I guess, something going on in his life, but either way, I'm like, this is lazy in terms of script as well, because there's just nothing fleshed out. Their relationship isn't clear. At one point, Connor's like, God, I must really love you, but it's like, nothing's obvious.
There's a nice, unnecessary, poor sex scene as well.
Yes, so, like, why? Okay, you and your ex are back together. Do we need to see you in bed? Like, we get it. I can't believe you said the unnecessary sex scene, but
Well, there are very necessary sex scenes, and there's very necessary nude scenes in movies and things like this, but there are also many unnecessary ones. And this was completely unnecessary. And it doesn't aid the story at all. Lack of story even.
And we also get Moira going to her shrink, who you mentioned.
Bruce Dern.
Yeah. And he's sort of taking her through regressions where she's re-experiencing a time from her, like, I guess she's a teenager in this. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be explaining kind of the start of Skeleton. And we find out pretty quickly that Skeleton is called Lee. And Lee is her cousin. And Lee also has a little sister. Now, I think that's a good segue to the other part of this story, which follows Skeleton a little bit. And it turns out his little sister nowadays is a nurse. And she finds Lee after he's been shot by Moira.
In the forest again.
And she finds him in the forest, and she takes him to her house and kind of has like a medical setup.
Yeah, he's not really willing. He's not really willing to go because she has to sedate him with.
Well, they've done a very, again, like, Jason Michael type thing. Like, he never speaks. He doesn't make any noise. And for some baffling reason...
A lot of people try to do a Jason Michael thing.
He's he's immune to, like, attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he gets shot multiple times, that doesn't kill him. He fights with, like, 4 people at once at one point, and he's like, oh, that was a bit uncomfortable, but let me carry on killing you. Where did that come from? Because they're trying to explain this backstory with Moira and the regression, that he's a regular guy who, like, turned evil because essentially she asked him.
Yeah, I don't know where his powers come from.
It makes no sense.
But if we go to the whole 1 year later thing, after Skeleton has killed off the Gaudizio brothers, the special Gaudizio brothers' father, and the sister's taking care of him in, like you mentioned, this medical basement thing. So she's had him tied up for a year, but he's got his shirt off and he has, like, impeccable pecs.
We hadn't said anything out loud, but apparently you'd had in your head six-pack killer, and I said out loud, I was like, wow, for someone who's been, like, chained down to a bed for a year, he's in very good physical shape.
Yeah, considering the state of Jason, he's maggot infested, and he's essentially walking dead by number 5 or whatever.
Absolutely ridiculous. And again, this is.
And he's got a perfect haircut. I don't know who's been doing his hair because he's always got his mask on as well.
But also, we get a point before his sister goes and finds him after being shot and, nurses him back to health and all this. We get one of these unnecessary moments. So she goes to a hardware store to buy all the sort of bits and pieces to tie him down and whatever she's going to need. And you could have just done, like, a quick sort of split-second montage, like grabbing stuff, receipt from the till, go back to whatever's happening. But for some reason they choose to draw this out and show, like, an interaction with the store clerk being like a big pervert and stuff and hitting on her.
You want some candy?
Do you want some candy?
So now, after seeing that scene, I was like, so...
Is she supposed to be a kid as
yeah,
well?
is she being groomed by this... Is this, like, 39-year-old woman being groomed by this 50-year-old store clerk?
And I can now confirm that goes absolutely nowhere. It goes absolutely nowhere. In fact, I wrote a list of all the things that just make no sense. Okay. Nothing leads anywhere or makes any sense. Why the pervy clerk? Why the regressions which lead to nothing? I thought there was going to be a lot more to it. It was super vague. I think they were trying to insinuate that Moira as a kid was being abused by her dad, and she convinced Lee that he had to kill the dad, and that's, like, what started it all off. But then there's still no explanation as to why Lee decided to go after Moira, etc., etc. Then why can't he be hurt or killed? How fucking old are the sons? I did right.
Old enough to know better.
And well, this bit as well. So I will say this because it's another, like, why. So we get the feeling the whole time, and Moira says, she's being stalked by him. Like, she knows he wants to kill her and her sons, and she gets the police involved constantly and what this. But at the end, Skeleton manages to break free of his sister, and he's in their house now, Moira's house and her sons, and he's attacking them, and the 2 sons, one of the sons' girlfriends, and the mum are all sort of defending and fighting him, and he seems impervious. But then they all of them fly through a window, and even though it's a ground floor window, this seems to knock them all out.
It's like me falling off this chair.
Yeah, but that's done them in. And he gets up and he, like, raises his weapon, and you think, okay, yeah, he's going to try and kill Moira, the whole reason that he's been doing everything. But no, he goes to the one person who's not even involved,
to do with anything.
The girlfriend of one of the sons, kills her, and then just wanders off.
Yeah, Tyrese doesn't get him.
And he leaves Moira, Connor, and whatever this other brother is called, just leaves them there, and we're like, well, I thought the whole point of this story is that...
Also, when they fall through this window pane, apart from Skeleton who gets up, the rest of them are lined up perfectly in order. Like, who falls through a window and lines up in complete order?
Yeah, in a row.
Yeah, the whole, I've pretty much written all of the same thing, like flashbacks that mean nothing from Shawnee's therapy with Bruce Dern. But you've mentioned a couple of things, no, I don't want to make my bed and stuff like this. At one point, the other brother, he says to Shawnee that he's going to move out of the house. And he was like, Mom, I'm going to move out. I'm 49 now.
But he, like, prepares her first. He's like, Mom, I got something really important to say. And, I don't really know how to break it to you, but I think I want to move out.
And then he drives off.
She's pretty like, thank fuck, finally.
Moira goes back into the house, into the kitchen, And then sad sack Connor comes down the stairs and he says, "Mom, did you tell my brother to move out of the house?" And he just carried on. I was just like, what was going on? What's happening?
Oh, and Connor's also pissed off because he thinks his dad's death is his mum's fault, and especially because it turns out she's been writing. So it turns out Lee Skeleton was in
Skeleton Lee,
a like mental asylum or something, and she had been writing him letters. Now we have no idea what these letters are actually about. They're just used as like, look, he's got our address, right? But even when she's confronted, and she explains to him like, "Oh, I just wanted to make sure it was over." I'm like, what?
Well,
how does that make sense with letters?
That's that special Gaudizio magic again.
Zero sense. Yeah. And did I have anything else that made no sense? Oh yeah, that was another thing. So throughout this thing, Moira is convinced, obviously, that Lee is out there trying to get them, and there's a few other like killings that happen throughout that she's like, it's him, and she keeps telling the police, but the police don't believe her. But why don't they believe her? They're like, oh, it's not Lee. But I'm like, because you know he's there, you've seen him, and he's not in the hospital, he's not dead, he's not in the institution. So why are they so convinced it's not him?
Yeah, you've gone through all of this. Now let's just concentrate more of like the funnier things, you know, away from the brother being funny, being 49 years old and complaining that his brother's moving out and that he doesn't want to make his bed and stuff. There were parts. So you've mentioned that the sister's at the hardware store at one point.
Yes.
And I've also mentioned that during this movie, because it's 1 year later, in the movie, in their world, someone has made a movie about Skeleton.
Yeah.
And he's wearing all the same. The poster is the same mask that Skeleton has and all this. But then Skeleton in the actual movie that we're watching, he goes to the hardware store dressed in his Chucky overalls and his mask, just in broad daylight, and no one like pays any attention to him, even though this town is supposed to be well aware of him, much like, you know, Haddonfield is aware of Michael Myers. But he's just allowed to walk around outside with his mask on, go shopping in the hardware store. The hardware store clerk doesn't recognise who the hell he is. No one seems to recognise who he is, and yet, well, I guess the film flopped because no one's seen him. Second.
Or they're just so used to people being in that mask.
Yeah, one of my favourite scenes is, I think it's when we see Shawnee Smith for the second time. She steps out of her house in daytime and she sees a car down the road. And it's been like, scoping her, tailing her or something like this. So I think she rings Tyrese Gibson's cop and she's like, "That bitch is black. Did you run the plate, bitch? Bitch, that guy's outside my house again, you little bitch. Did you run that plate yet, bitch?" Just the word plate and bitch just keeps coming out of her mouth. "You run that plate yet, bitch? That bitch is outside my house, bitch."
Oh God. We also have a couple of like kids, 2 kids.
I was about to say this, yeah.
Again, it doesn't really lead to anything
Before we
whatsoever.
get to the kids though, so we've mentioned the unnecessary sex scene. The other brother, he's kind of rekindling his romance with this ice skating girl, and
who doesn't skate?
Who doesn't skate, by the way, very well. And they go to bed and they have this unnecessary sex scene. And then we next see them, they're fully clothed but sleeping in bed. But it's like 2 p.m. outside. So again, you make a very good point. Now, does this guy have a job? You know, kind of thing. And then at 2 p.m, 2 kids just break into their house.
Yeah, it's so dumb. They're wearing a skeleton mask, and they've got like fake knife. Oh, and he by the way, because he's gone down to investigate some noise, and he's brought a weapon along with him.
Pulls it out.
A nice little putter.
Oh yeah, the putter. You would have thought, like, surely this guy has got a full set of golf clubs then.
If you've got a putter, I'd imagine you've got some other irons. Why wouldn't you take
go for the
proper
iron
one?
Yeah, don't go for the. It just looked like he was out for a spot of, crazy golf or something.
Don't get me wrong. I'm sure a putter would still hurt a lot, but
it just looks stupid.
It's like
it's not cinematic
it's
to
like
carry
one
a
of
putter
those things
around.
you do in Scary Movie where you've got all these deadly weapons and then something non-deadly.
I'll take a banana.
You pick that one exactly. Yeah. It was and these 2 kids are little shits, but Karin is happy because kids are not off limits in this, at least. One of the little shits does get it from Skeleton.
But they break it, like I say, they break into the house and he runs downstairs with his putter. And one of the kids, I'm pretty sure, pulls out a knife.
Or at least a fake one.
Or at least a
something.
fake knife.
They're like going as if they're going to try and get him.
The brother is on the floor on his back, and the two kids are standing above him. And when we say kids, they're like, what, 15?
Maximum.
Like, so either way, they still got a weapon. And he just ends up going... Like, the girlfriend comes down the stairs and goes, oh, they're just kids. Just let them go. And then you walk out the house.
The little shits.
And then the brother's like, that was crazy. I'm like, no, two people just broken into your house, you moron. And again, this goes back to the very special Gaudijo brother script writing. And I looked at some of their press clippings, and they seem to think quite a lot of themselves, these Gaudijo brothers. I mean, his performance was very special as well.
Yeah.
The other one is in it. He's the one with the immaculately bearded cop guy who's not in it for very long. But we noticed him and we're like, look, get a load of this guy.
Yeah. It's completely baffling.
There's another bit as well where Tyrese, we hungry, Gibson, he's accosted by Skeleton's sister, and she puts a pillow over his head, gets a gun, and clearly shoots him through the forehead. But then a few minutes later, we come back to the scene, and Tyrese Gibson's like, ooh, my neck.
He's got a little nick.
He's got a little nick. And now, even if she did miss his forehead, there's no way that it's gone from like forehead to neck that's not even covered by the pillow with just a tiny little slice. It's like a paper cut on his neck.
And another thing, like, there were so many things that I thought were supposed to lead somewhere, which then, like, absolutely nothing seems to lead to anything. As
and the ending,
I've discussed, the ending
atrocious.
Is terrible.
There is no ending.
But again,
here's the end.
There was another thing that's super random. So we've got the cops that you mentioned, but we've also got some, like, special cop guy who is brought in, but we barely see him. It's just mentioned at one point that he's been, like, following the skeleton case, and he's, like, the skeleton guy. But there was no point in that. There was no point in it whatsoever. It's like they've just taken bits that they thought were cool from other scripts and movies and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we should put that in. But why? I don't know, man. It's just cool. Yeah. It's just so dumb. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, I want to say another word, but I won't. But if you want to have a laugh, though, watch this movie, you little bitch. Put this movie on, you little bitch.
Yeah. I can't say much more. I think
I might look out for the Gaudijo brothers' other written works just for if I'm ever feeling low.
Well, I also found it interesting that the two writers have a production company, and
the Gaudijo twins.
I think there are about like 6 or 7 production companies that produced this movie, and their company is one of them. And then you've also got some other brothers, which turns out the director. His production company is also one of the production companies.
The director had previous credits, which I'd seen in movies that I've watched and enjoyed. But it just turns out he was like, assistant to Harvey Keitel in Reservoir Dogs, assistant to whoever in Eyes Wide Shut and stuff like this. And now he's somehow directing this movie for the very special twins.
Yeah, just baffling, and probably the worst ending I've seen in a very, very long time.
And that's saying something, because when you consider the absolute lack of good storytelling in all modern horror, there's no good storytelling in any modern horror, and no good endings, this one really takes the cake.
Should we move on?
Yeah, we could probably carry on with this movie, you little bitch, but we'll move on, bitch, to number 2.
Are you gonna make your bed after this, Johnny?
I don't want to make my bed.
So, what did we put? We put
Longlegs. Yeah. Now, this is a movie that is taken seriously. I was expecting something different. I actually spoken to one of my best friends briefly about it. Well, I've not really spoken about the movie. Josh was like, "Oh, have you seen Longlegs? You might like it. You might not." And he says,
That's a great thing.
Because he's like, there are certain things that you might enjoy from it, but overall, probably not, and that turned out to be the case.
Yeah, I think for the biggest thing for me, which I have to say, is
shame on me, by the way, because I was actually looking. I got caught up in the hype again, and even though I didn't go to the cinema, because I'm not going to waste my money going to the cinema, knowing that most, if not all, modern horror is for me trash. I still, when I saw it come stream, I was like, okay, I am interested to watch this movie, and I do have some kind of expectations from it, and it just didn't. It just flew under all his expectations for mostly.
So as I was saying, the thing that stuck with me the most is the most jarring thing was actually the prosthetics they put on him.
On Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Like, what was the point in that? It looked like prosthetics. It looked stupid. It looked ridiculous. And then pair that with the fact that he's like, you know, supposed to be giving this off-the-wall performance where he keeps like singing and doing like high-pitched stuff. That, it literally was just making me laugh.
The singing made me laugh.
It was so silly.
When we first saw Longlegs in the opening scene where he walks up to the child and you only see his face from like
that was the only
here
decent
down,
bit. Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, and he's being creepy, and I did like Nicolas Cage, and I am a fan anyway, but there is something that he did bring is that I would say that probably the character of Longlegs, even though it's not really drawn out too much, was probably the most interesting thing about the film, and that's not saying much because the rest of it was just an abomination, and just things tacked on, smushed together for no reason. Again, absolutely terrible storytelling, considering that this movie has been compared, and again, you can't listen to these people, but there are 3 outlets like Total Film, Slash Film and Time Out, I believe, which gave this 100 out of 100. So if you're giving Longlegs 100 out of 100, the absolute perfect score, then what is The Exorcist? What is Goodfellas? The Godfather? RoboCop? Lord of the Rings? Movies of this ilk? It's almost like these people must be paid. They have to have been paid off. They don't know they don't know what they're talking about, or they just haven't seen any movies. It's like the first time they've seen a movie with like, you know, dialogue and which isn't in black and white.
I do understand that it
makes no sense.
It can be a taste matter to a certain extent, but then I just felt like.
But you can't give it 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100. It's not even close to that. Forget it. Absolutely forget it.
I found this movie quite boring.
It was boring.
It dragged a lot, and there weren't any performances apart from Nicolas Cage. They were all very like.
The writing was absolute trash. Trash writing.
I didn't like.
This arguably had as bad writing as Bloodline Killer.
I didn't like Micah Monroe's performance. I'm sorry.
Who was that?
She was the main girl.
Okay, Lee.
The detective girl.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Something else I was going to say is this movie has been compared to like, oh, this is the new Seven, or this is the new Silence of the Lambs. I'm like, this is nothing. Like, okay, you might be trying to be like that. You might be trying your hardest to try and make something, but it doesn't even come close on any level. Performance, story, whatever. Atmosphere.
I felt like everyone I was watching, there was at least one scene throughout it where I was like, well, I'm watching an actor on a set now. Like, I'm not watching a story unfold. I'm watching someone who's been told.
It just went from one scene
like
to another with no real cohesion, and there was no cohesion in, oh, let's just have it be satanic now. Or, you know, I've got a lot of questions about this. So at the beginning, before the movie starts, you have a quote on the screen from the glam rock band T-Rex and their song Bang a Gong.
Yeah, I don't know what that quote was supposed to be.
That quote has nothing. Well, later on, they do talk about like the multi-headed Hydra who wears crowns and all this. They're talking about the Book of Revelation, and there's mention of the Hydra in the quote from the Mark Bolan T-Rex song Bang a Gong. But why? What is that quote? And what was even the Book of Revelation about the multi-headed Hydra wearing crowns had nothing to do with the movie either. And not only do they have the quote from Bang a Gong from the glam rock dandy Mark Bolan at the beginning, they also then play when the movie finishes, and it's supposed to be this like big like, oh my god, satanic moment, and then they start playing the song. They play the song over the credits, Bang a Gong, and this has been done. This has been done to death now, where people think they've made a serious horror movie, and they'll put on like a pop rock song at the end, and it takes you.
It's supposed to be like a whoa.
Yeah, and it is so lame now.
That's the other thing with this film that
it just makes you like gag almost.
It felt very.
That's nothing against T-Rex, by the way. Just to be clear.
It's quite ironic because I know Heathen is very ambitious and could, to some people, possibly come off as what's the word when you're like trying to be something that you are not.
Like pretentious, or
that's the word,
right?
Pretentious.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there are other things that could be pretentious, but it just works. Like it's done well enough. Whereas this one, I feel like the director was kind of like having a wank over how good he is, whilst like distracting himself. Because even the very beginning bit, so it's shot in square format. It's supposed to be in the 70s or something.
And the rest of the movie's based in the 90s.
And it was like, you know, we see this little girl who's gone out and to check out the car and stuff, and before that one cool bit of Longlegs, his first intro comes, you get the thing of like, oh, here's the girl, and then boom, here's a bit of trees, boom, here's a bit of other trees. But they used the same sound effect, and like that I've seen in 100 other films. I was like, there's absolutely zero original. If anything, it just makes me think, oh well, that's super fucking lazy.
In the Heathen short, I made every single sound that we have in that, including multiple voices. Every single sound is original. Most of it is made by my throat, with no post-production. And I did it all by myself, sitting down at the computer in my bedroom. These people have got like a whole crew of people around, a whole team to be doing this. And this is constant. In every single movie that I see, well, if you've got this department and this department and this department, all you've got to concentrate on is this. How are you failing miserably at every single level? And going back to the song choice at the end of Longlegs, Bang a Gong, we have, and I'm not going to mention the song, but I've picked a song for the end credits of Heathen, and it's completely to do with what we've just seen, and it fits the mood, it fits the tone.
Why wouldn't you? With all the music out there, exactly. It's so easy to find something that's like, oh, this is exactly what the story's about, and it's exactly the right sound.
With these guys, just like, oh my god, let's get T-Rex on. It doesn't make any sense. And when you say about the guy, you know, you think he's like playing with himself. He's, you know, he's kind of a nepo baby. This is Osgood Perkins, who is the son of Anthony Perkins, who plays Norman Bates, obviously in the Psycho movies. And, you know, you love Psycho 2, 3 and 4, not so much the first one. And Anthony Perkins directed, if not all of the sequels, at least 2 of them, I believe. And, you know, they're movies that don't take themselves too seriously. And it's great.
No,
you can get into it. It's fantastic. This movie takes itself really seriously, and it just fails on every single level. So I do want to say, so I did like Nicolas Cage personally. And I did like Alicia Witt, who played the mother, the accomplice. I thought Alicia Witt was good. Right, but what I do have, so we've got, were we just supposed to know that, you know, so Blair Underwood, the cop with the family, were we obviously supposed to know that it's obvious that he's going to be targeted after hearing everything that's going on? Because I was like, obviously Blair Underwood and his family are going to be targeted like the rest of the families have been done in the past. And secondly, am I supposed to know that the mum is in on it? Because it was just so clear to me from pretty much the first time we see Alicia Witt that she's in on it. And I don't know if they were trying to keep that
It wasn't to me, so I think they were trying to keep it a secret.
I guess I'm the writer, so these kind of things, they just come to me. But so there are things in this movie that make the bad writing really stand out, and I just want to give a couple of examples. So there's a part where they catch Longlegs, and for some inexplicable reason he's just standing at a bus stop in the middle of nowhere waiting to be caught, and they catch him and they put him in the room. And they bring down, you know, Agent Lee, and they're having this conversation, and he's saying all of his weird stuff, and then at the end of this conversation he starts banging his head against the table and he kills himself. But she's been sent to this interrogation to find out anything about, you know, possible accomplices that he has. He kills himself, and then Lee comes out of the room. And Blair Underwood's agent comes out and he's like, "Look what you've done. Now we're not going to find out anything about the accomplices." And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," or whatever. But as he's walking away, he's like, "He clearly worked alone. He worked alone." I'm like, well, one minute you're saying, "Oh, you're mad because you're now saying that you're not going to get answers for the accomplices," but now you're walking away saying that he walked alone.
I thought he was mad that, you know, he wouldn't be put in jail or whatever. But I was like, oh, he's gone now.
But it still doesn't make sense that he's saying, "I want answers about the possible accomplices."
I didn't notice him say that.
But then he says, "Oh, he clearly works alone," so he has no reason to be mad in that moment.
Well, there's a lot of things that character in particular, the detective guy, says that make not much sense to me.
You know, why? So I've got, why is Blair Underwood mad at Lee for the death of Longlegs after saying that? So what is that? These guys that can't write again. Why dolls? Because Longlegs puts an orb in these dolls' heads.
Yeah.
When he could just throw the orb through a window if he wants, and then he can do it to anybody rather than just kids who like dolls, because he's only targeting families with kids who play with dolls, because he's a doll maker, and the dolls are supposed to be possessed, much like Annabelle. I mean, how many more possessed doll stories are you going to get? And the whole possessed doll thing is tacked on, because there's no reason to have possessed dolls in the movie if it's all from the orb.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is it's a vehicle for Satan to get into the house
No,
and
but
to
the orb,
start
the
controlling
orb,
the families.
the orb is the.
But that is whatever this orb is supposed to signify. The point is that Longlegs is a minion of the devil, and it's the devil that's controlling these people's, the families'
Yeah, I
minds
get
to
all
make
that.
it all happen through this orb thing. I guess
I'm very
yeah.
clear on that.
I
But
also,
they just made Longlegs a doll maker because they think it's creepy.
But also, why?
All the power comes from the orb. Something that was reasonably cool. Sorry to interrupt. Just while it's in my head was, I don't know if you noticed, but now and again in the very background of scenes, there would just be a silhouette of the devil.
No, I didn't notice.
I noticed it, I think 3 times. It possibly might be in there more. But that was like one half decent. If the movie was actually satanic for a reason, it would have been cool. But it's just another like idea thrown in. The whole Hail Satan thing as well. It just that came out of nowhere for me.
Well, because we started the week with Immaculate and Longlegs, I thought the third movie should also have something to do with the devil, because they both. And then you were like, but it's not. And I was like, well, they're saying
but
it
you
is
get what I'm
to do
saying.
with the
They're
devil.
saying it is, but there's no reason for it. It's just like me adding a clown
But then
into
how
Heathen.
else would the family
It's like
be
me.
getting possessed?
It's like me adding a clown part into Heathen just because I think clowns are scary.
Well,
or
no,
whatever.
because if you don't have the devil, then how are these people's minds being controlled?
Because the thing is, at the beginning, it's not made abundantly clear that Longlegs is, a minion of the devil or whatever. So when it seems like they got to a point, and they're like, oh, we don't actually have a story for Longlegs, so let's just make him a minion of the devil.
But they do say they're like, there's not evidence of like someone breaking in. There's no evidence of anyone being
Yeah, but
in
we've
the
heard
house.
all that. There are other parts still of terrible writing. So Officer Lee, she's in her cabin house, and she's sitting at a desk, and she looks out into the woods, and she sees a shadowy figure, and she goes out to inspect it with her gun, and then, which is stupid by the way, and then she's behind her. We then see a shadowy figure in her cabin. She goes into the cabin and she finds a letter on her table, and instead of thinking, oh my word, someone's just broken into my house and left this letter here, she just gets the letter, sits down in a chair and starts reading the letter. No one would do that. Stupid.
I can't decide whether
Why is it at a bus stop?
I can't decide whether I did or didn't like her cabin as well, because it seemed quite like you can't like who would actually live in something like that. It seemed very much like made for a thing, but at least it wasn't just like a regular nothing.
I didn't hate that because there were so much other things that were wrong. So I've already in the notes here. I've already gone obvious mother family outcome, which I've already mentioned. Now with the mother, Alicia Witt, she says, because she's the accomplice of Longlegs. And by the way, why is he called Longlegs? Like
That's
again,
what I was
there's
going to
nothing.
ask. What's
There's
Longlegs got to do with anything?
That's what I'm talking about. It's all just tacked on. It's all
he
just
says
let's throw this out there and put it in there.
In that creepy bit in the very beginning bit, which is like a flashback thing to the 70s, he's like, "Oh, I've just brought my long legs."
That bit was so good.
But then, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is this some like religious thing that we don't get because we haven't like fully read the Bible, or I don't know.
So, in the flashbacks to when Officer Lee has been abducted by Longlegs. Not Officer Lee, sorry. Alicia, we've got the child in the basement. It is Officer Lee because she had Longlegs has got Lee in the basement and he's talking to her.
Oh, I see what you mean. No, it's a doll. It's a doll version of her.
The doll
He's
version of
making
her,
her doll,
whatever.
yeah.
But anyway, her mum is still in on it because and Longlegs is with the daughter, because the reason that Longlegs isn't killing Alicia Witt and the daughter is because she's agreed to be his accomplice, or has at least been influenced by the devil to be his accomplice. And the reason that she does it is that Longlegs says that he will spare
The daughter.
the daughter.
Yeah.
Flash forward to the ending when they're in Blair Underwood's family's house and Alicia Witt is sitting there with her daughter. When Lee tries to stop it all, Alicia Witt, her mother, then comes at her with a knife to kill her. So you've been protecting her all this time, and now you want to go against Longlegs, and I'm just going to kill you. So the whole thing of, oh yeah, I'm doing this to protect my child, but oh now I'm just going to kill her myself. Just more nonsense.
The thing that bothered me in the final scene was
how obvious it was going to be.
Lee knows what's going on now. Like, her mum's clued her in. I don't know why her mum suddenly decided now was the time to shoot the Lee doll either. I don't know what the point in that was, but it apparently knocks Lee out for a bit. Anyway, So Lee is in the house of her, you know, her colleague, her boss, I guess, for the boss's daughter's birthday party. And the doll is already there, her mum's already there, you know what's happening, right? The doll is starting to possess them. And it's also really obvious from the way that this family is acting that they're under the devil's influence or whatever. But what I didn't understand was, like, why is she's not doing anything. She ends up, if anything. So the dad then goes off with the mum to the kitchen and offs her. And we know the next thing he's going to do is off his own kid and then off himself. That's, like, the pattern of what they do. But, like, Lee is like, oh, you know, stay away. And then she shoots him. Instead of, like, why? Surely you could try at least first, like, shooting the doll or getting the doll out of there or something. But she doesn't do anything like that. She's just like, oh, he's under the influence now, so I'm going to shoot him. And then she just tries to take the daughter out with her. But I was like, why aren't you at least attempting to get to the root of it and saving all three of them? Because now you've just got an orphan as well. You've let her parents die because you just didn't even bother trying anything. You just shot the dad and... Ugh, no, it
She could have shot the doll a bunch of times,
seriously
but she
bothered me.
might not have shot the orb, which is the thing that actually possesses the doll.
Yeah, I'm not saying it would have worked.
So there's no
But
need
you
for a
could
doll.
have at least tried.
Could have
Like,
just thrown it. Could have put an
what
orb
did-
through the letterbox.
Take the doll away. Like, get the doll out of the house. Like, why is she just standing around, like, knowing what's going on and just being like, oh, okay, I guess I'll let the adults, like, be possessed and kill each other and whatnot, and then I'll try and get the daughter
Look,
out.
if someone likes this movie, I'm not mad at that opinion or anything like that. But to give it 100 out of 100, 10 out of 10, saying this is Silence of the Lambs, saying this is 7, that's movie making on a completely different stratosphere. This is just another generic, doesn't make much sense in parts. Let's try and be super off the wall, but we've gone too far.
I didn't find anyone particularly likeable either. I found everyone quite...
That wasn't a really much of a concern of mine just because of everything else that was going on. But I get what you mean though. I didn't like the main agent's performance, to be honest.
No, that's what I said, Michael Monroe.
Yeah, I know you've already mentioned that, but I was thinking about it, and after you mentioned it, I was thinking, yeah, actually, I could see again what they're kind of going for, but you can't help but then compare it to like Jodie Foster and stuff. If you're reading this kind of crap, by the way, comparing it to that, you're gonna do that, obviously, and this isn't even close.
I think
not close
as well. Both in Longlegs and the one we're going to discuss next, Immaculate, both of them have a leading lady, and I feel like they've both given such, like, underwhelming shows of any kind of emotion. Like, I like the whole, like, low-key thing. It can work really, really well. But it's better
Everyone
when
seems to do it these days.
offset with something where, you know, you've got a reason now where you can have a strong reaction, so show us what you've got. Whereas they were both just like, or something horrendous has just happened, and they're just like, oh. And that's it. That's all you get from them. And I'm not saying they were like bad performances, but there was no moment where I was like, wow. Nothing.
No, it's completely bland. I would never watch Longlegs again because there's no reason to. It's not a compelling movie.
It was...
I would watch Bloodline Killer over Longlegs just for sheer comedic value. Sheer comedic value of Bloodline Killer and those special Gaudizio twins. But Longlegs as a movie that takes itself seriously, and I wasn't expecting, obviously, a 7 Silence of the Lambs, because that's just complete nonsense. I don't think there's been a good horror movie. This is like a horror thriller, isn't it? There isn't, but it hasn't been a good horror thriller for me in at least 10 years now. It's just piss poor.
I also feel like, because, you know, when Lee is sort of unraveling
100 out of 100.
everything, and she looks at, like, dates, and she's like, there are notes written in code, and she's like unraveling everything, and she's somewhat psychic apparently also, but I don't really understand the point behind all of this. So they're saying, like, they take kids whose birthdays are on the 14th of whatever month.
Yeah, and again,
like, is there a reason
you would think
for
there'd be a
that?
reason for that, but it's not.
And then the dates they're killed, the only reason seems to be that they make some kind of inverted triangle on the calendar, but even that, like, doesn't it just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like unless you guys have seen and understood something completely different from it and you want to enlighten us in the comments,
they haven't.
I just don't understand the point of a lot of these little, bits that they put in. Just where's this leading?
Well, I can just tick off the list now. We've got the Gaudigio twins and Osgood Perkins, and I destroy those guys as a writer, but I don't have a movie yet. Not just yet. Not on screen anyway. So should we move on to number 1?
Yes.
Yeah, number 1, Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney vehicle.
Now this one I was looking forward to, and I was very disappointed by it.
I was really
hoping.
The reason I wasn't looking forward to this one as much is because Longlegs is presented as a super serious adult movie, right? And it was just pretty poor, whereas Immaculate is a little bit more teeny adult horror. So I kind of knew what to expect in terms of tone and things like that. But yeah, do you want to go? I was just going to say that this was... I've never heard Sydney Sweeney speak. I've never seen her in anything. I don't know much about her. So I've only got this to go on in terms of her as an actress. Yeah,
same. And nothing she did was bad, in my opinion.
I thought she was the best thing about the movie.
I thought well, actually no, I think her friend was...
the bitchy friend?
But she's not bitchy. She's like, she's lived an actual life outside and then gone into the nunnery, and she's that sort of sarcastic sidekick friend type.
But was she the one that was bitchy to her at the beginning when Sydney Sweeney first shows up?
No,
is that someone different?
No, that's someone else.
Who's the best? Why am I completely forgetting the best friend?
She's the one who gets her tongue ripped out.
Oh yeah, that bit was cool.
That bit was frustrating. So,
well, it was good compared to the rest of the movie anyway.
So I've only written...
There's some tongue cutting out in Heathen, by the way.
I've written 3...
Much better than it is in Immaculate.
I've written 3 overriding notes that stuck in my head at the end of this film. Rubbish friend. I'll get into that, and that is to do with the tongue being ripped out scene. Everything is super slow, but the birth is like that. We'll get into that also.
Again, that was obvious.
Left feeling overall more annoyed than anything. So those are my... Yeah,
my ones are pretty small as well. So I've got the opening 90 seconds of the Heathen short, which is me walking up a flight of stairs, interjected with weird images, is more intriguing than this entire film. And I didn't have I didn't have nipples either to make it more intriguing. I could have just busted your nipples out.
Do you know what?
It's just me. It's all me in the beginning of Heathen.
There were a lot of nipples in this, but considering the only thing actually, in fact, I knew about this movie, it was obvious from like the cover and stuff that it's something to do with like nuns or whatever. But the only thing I knew was Sydney Sweeney and tits.
And of course, the title Immaculate, it was obvious that was going to be Immaculate Conception somewhere on the line.
I was expecting more titty.
Yeah, you just get a bit of wet t-shirt, really, didn't you?
Yeah, I was expecting sort of like full frontal, and at one point when Sydney and the friend that you have only just remembered who she is are in like the
I remember her now.
Big bath.
Now that I remember.
Sydney's like in between her legs, like with her back to her and stuff.
Yeah,
but there was something...
get your mind out the gutter. She's in between her legs, sitting back.
Because her friend is like cleaning her hair or something. But
yeah.
Again, I thought maybe that they were going to lead into some sort of like their friendship blossoms into something more kind of thing.
A bit like Benedetta.
Like Benedetta. Yeah, so I thought maybe it would get slight Benedetta vibes, and I was...
Benedetta
literally blasts this movie out of the waters. I mean, as much as Benedetta was constantly... There was always something interesting and like, what going on?
Well,
this one was
done by the greatest
slow.
director ever, in my opinion, in Paul Verhoeven, so he's only ever done great movies. But if I could just go back, so yeah, opening 90 seconds of The Heathen short, which I made for 30 quid, it was more intriguing and more suspenseful than this entire movie. I felt like I was always watching it, so I wasn't totally bored and out the movie, but I was never, enthralled, say, I was watching it. It has things in this movie that you've seen 100 times, done exactly the same way. There's no soul, no real feeling, poor character development. and just no real tension. But the one thing that it does have, which I've never seen before, is a nun training montage. So you think about it, you've got Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, you know, running up a mountain or something with rocks tied to his back. Then you've got like Steven Seagal doing, you know, acupuncture and meditation. And of course you've got Daniel's son standing on a rock on the beach and wax on, wax off. And in the nun montage, you've got a nun fanning a sheet. So when the laundry came out, I knew that this movie was going to, you know, step into overdrive. Nun training montage.
Yeah, I also don't really understand. So we get like a mini intro thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if it's a flashback or in that moment type thing, and it's, you know, a nun at this Italian nunnery sneaking into the head nun's. So she goes in and gets the keys, and then she's trying to get out of this nunnery. And we get so we see something's obviously wrong. She's terrified, and we get people robed with like this red sock over their face or something, and we see these red-faced beings or people like a few times throughout the film. They're always like sort of hinted at, and there's an ominous feeling about them. But then when you find out what the actual like storyline is and all of this, I don't really understand how that ties into anything. Like, who are they? Why have they got the red over their face? It doesn't make any sense to me, really.
To be fair, I hadn't even written down the red-faced people in my notes. I've completely forgotten about them simply because they had nothing to do with the movie. What kind of the things that stood out to me more was, so when Sydney Sweeney first joins and she starts talking to that guy and he's asking all the questions like, oh, so what made you want to become a nun and all this? And it was, again, is it supposed to be super, you know, undeniably obvious that he's not a good guy, because that was just really obvious from the beginning, and you've seen that kind of character 1,000 times. You've seen
there was nothing. He did nothing interesting with that character.
No, or at least the writing didn't, and he had nothing to do with it. And I wasn't loving that. And when I got the best friend confused with the more bitchy nun at the beginning, we've seen that 1,000 times done, you know, way better and things like this. Yeah, so you've got
like the head nun and then her like direct underling.
Yeah, like a little protege.
And she's
clearly jealous of Sydney Sweeney when she turns up and things like this. And then obviously when Sydney Sweeney is the chosen one, the Immaculate one, she loses her mind again, you know, saying, it should be me and
try it again with me. So it turns out, if you haven't seen this, that this father priest figure guy is in cahoots with some of the other top like nun or whatever
and things,
and they have one of the nails that was used to pin Jesus to the cross, and he comes from a background of like geneticist biology. I don't know exactly what he explains it as, but he's managed to take DNA from this nail and impregnate women, and we find out he's done it loads and loads of times, and it's, you know, getting progressively better, supposedly, right? And so they've impregnated Sydney Sweeney's character without her knowing, and
she's a virgin.
Yeah, she's never been touched.
She's immaculate.
It's really bizarre. So it's not clear really who's in on it and who's not, in my opinion. But then it's the friend, the one character that I really liked, she's the only one who's like saying, well, you know, something messed up is going on here. This doesn't just happen. People are like up to something.
Oh yeah, she was the potty mouth one, wasn't she? Gets taken
She's the
away.
one who'd been in like an abusive relationship, and she was like all of this.
And again,
stuff,
you had that directly in Benedetta again. Just done way better.
Yeah.
And other movies.
But I did really like her.
She's just doing that character though.
But so we see like I said, they're in the bath, and like these two girls in that montage you mentioned, they're shown as like
the nun training montage.
They're super close, right?
Got the laundry out. Great montage.
They've become really good friends, and they live in like adjoining rooms essentially. And so after this friend starts to question things, and she's quite loud about it, she's like, why isn't anyone like seeing what's going on? And she gets dragged away. Now Sydney Sweeney's character wakes up at night, and she's looking for her, and she starts hearing like noises of distress, and you can hear her saying like aiuto, aiuto, and like, you know, help me, let me go, and all of this. And this pissed me off so fucking much. Like, I can't. You hear your friend in such awful distress. You're going to go out shot in a minute.
Yeah, it's scaring me.
You hear your friend in such awful distress.
It's so weak.
And even if, I wasn't really trying. Even if you, like, Sydney at this point, I guess, maybe knows something's up, but, like, not to what extent. Like, nothing really awful that she knows of has happened yet. And yet she still decides to just creep at, like, the slowest pace possible towards her friend's cries for help. And again, instead of, like, I don't know, banging on the door or opening it or doing anything to help her friend,
She just looks.
she just watches. She watches her friend in a torture chair get her tongue cut off.
Yeah, her tongue pulled out somewhat.
And she does nothing.
By the way, the image that I've got in my head for my tongue cutting heathen is way
friend.
better because it's seen from a distance, isn't it? For tongue cutting, so it's not graphic or anything like that. I just want to, in the nun training montage, do you just think
It's
that
fucking montage.
instead of it just being laundry and making beds and stuff, do you think it would have been given a bit more oomph if they played some Eye of the Tiger by Survivor behind it or something like this? Or Burning Heart? Do you think that could have upped it a bit, laundry and Survivor? Because if you think about it, just looking at Sylvester Stallone climbing a mountain isn't all that enthralling, but putting a bit of,
No, I think it should have been
Survivor.
like some Madonna.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit on the nose, but I'm not disagreeing with it.
Anyway,
Maybe some T-Rex.
that was really dumb. So she just does nothing, and then also it's like her friend after that disappears, and we right towards the end we see her in the crypt. She's dead, but again, like, there's no mention of her after that. It's like, oh, she's disappeared, but nobody
Yeah. Okay. When
nobody reacts.
the father guy, who's the evil one, who befriends Sydney Sweeney when she first gets her and things. Sydney Sweeney ends up killing him. She burns him to death. So we think, right, in this room. And Sydney Sweeney's character then goes to the catacombs, which have been previously mentioned in the movie about the catacombs don't go there, whatever. And that was one cool thing, was the torch in the catacombs, but that's hard not to make that look cool. Like,
even that, like, they dragged
I'm not
it
done
out.
yet. So I'm talking about just the visuals of walking through the catacombs. It's hard to make that look rubbish, almost impossible. So that was just one thing that stood in my mind, was that. But my main point was that the guy who was been burnt in this room, he then obviously comes out of nowhere at the last second, just as Sydney Sweeney's about to get out of the catacombs and has his last attempt at killing her or whatever. It's just another cliche thing.
Oh, he's not trying to kill her, he's trying to
Or
get
trying
the
to
baby
kind of
out
get the
of her.
baby, same thing really. Same thing.
I also didn't understand, like, I don't know if this is supposed to be meaningful in one way or the other, because you could see it both ways. So Sydney ends up, like, she's in labour when all of this happens, the burning and stuff.
Are you talking about the feet as well? Remember the burnt feet?
Yeah, she tries to escape, so they burn her feet. But no, that's not what I was talking about. She knows obviously now what's going on and everything's wrong and blah 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 blah. But she kills the old nun woman who
Smashes her face in,
I'm
right?
not entirely sure how in on it she actually was, because she seems the whole time to be like actually quite caring.
She's devious. She's the most devious one, because she's she's in on it, but she's the one that doesn't give it away as much. But Sydney Sweeney smashes her face in, and that was one of the best bits.
With like a cross type thing. But yeah, so she kills her, and she like kills someone else. Then she tries to kill the priest guy, and then at the end, after she miraculously gives birth in like literally 2 seconds flat, it's like there's the baby. If only giving birth were that easy.
Spitting on me, dude.
If only it were that easy. And then she stones the baby, right?
Yeah, well, the baby. It's some kind of abomination, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not Jesus's child. You would think it's some kind of like Rosemary's Baby kind of ending, where they have some devil offspring, because you hear it making slightly weird sounds, and when you see Sydney Sweeney in front of the camera, in the background the baby is on the floor, but it's more like this mess of stuff. And when she rocks it to death, you know, it was obvious it was going to happen. It was obvious that was going to be the very ending. And that was the part, I guess, where I was like, actually, Sydney Sweeney, considering it's the first time I've ever seen her in anything, that's what I was like, actually, she's doing this really well. Like, the emotions that she's giving, the way she's, you know, portraying everything is really good. It just didn't have any effect because of the movie. It was completely ineffectual. And when you said about this is the one that you were most looking forward to out of all of them, this to me was like, it's almost like Twilight style with a bit of gore. Not that I've ever seen a Twilight, but it's not an adult movie.
I thought it was supposed to be an adult
it's
movie.
A more.
I didn't know it was supposed to be tweeny going in.
No, I'm not saying it is tweeny. I'm not saying it was meant to be tweeny. But I'm saying that's the way it came across to me. It's not a serious movie. It's a movie that's trying to be super serious, and it's just not. It's more for, if I was 15 years old in the cinema and saw this, you know, I wouldn't be very affected. It would be. It's aimed at 15-year-olds basically, not 30-year-olds.
One thing that I did enjoy thoroughly was how beautiful the convent was.
Yeah,
stunning. Again,
but
like it doesn't really matter.
That's like me saying with the catacombs. It's hard to make it look rubbish because it's religious.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the filmmaking.
Religious imagery is always great, and if you're going to make a movie about religion, there's so many things that you can pull from that there should be so many other movies which deal with religion, which should be way more interesting, and it's just not. It never is, and this is a perfect example of that, because all they've done is take things from other movies and do it nowhere near as well.
Oh, there was also a moment, literally, from another movie that made me think exactly of a scene from another film. Well, not another film we hate. I don't hate this film. This film was
I wouldn't
fine.
I wouldn't watch it again, though. There's no reason to watch this movie again.
I thought it was fine. But then,
so you'd watch it again? You'd sit there and think, oh,
I feel what my point was when we were starting
I feel like watching Immaculate.
We've got so much to say, we keep cutting each other off. So I'm going to finish now.
You've been very talky during this episode.
You be quiet now. Yeah, well. So there's one bit after she's found out that she's, you know, pregnant or whatever, and everyone's like praising her as the new Mary, and they dress her up in like a crown and a cloak, and they have everyone singing at her, and she's just standing there like crying, and it just took me instantly to Midsummer. You know, the bit I'm talking about where she's just there, just like crying, but they're not really showing anything. And this is what I mean with this film. Her performance was absolutely nothing, like there was nothing wrong with it whatsoever. And there were moments where, you know, I was like, yeah, she's probably quite a good actress. But then I don't know if it was her choice as an actress or if it was something she trusted the director to go with. But there were moments where she could have been emotional and it would have fit. But instead, you've got her in like this sort of catatonic... Like, so you mentioned the bit, so at one point when she tries to fake, like, a miscarriage, and she is trying to use this as an escape attempt, and it's obviously foiled, they get her back to the convent, and they use a hot burning poker in the shape of a cross to burn the soles of her feet. I
thought they were going to burn somewhere else, because they've got her on this tray or this bed with her legs open, and I thought, oh my god, are they going to do it? And then no, just on the foot.
I knew what they were going to do because I noticed before some old lady nun had the scars.
Yeah, so you noticed the scars on the foot. I just thought it was like a super
rubbery old
foot. Yeah, I didn't notice the cross on it.
Which again, I'm assuming then that means that this old lady nun had been, you know, a carrier of this Jesus supposed baby thing once, but that doesn't really make sense because this old nun is like in her 80s or something, and the father priest guy who's apparently like the mastermind of it all because he's the biology professor or whatever he is, he's not that old. So I'm like, well, did you try impregnating her when she was like 60? Because like, no wonder it didn't go very well. But no, so anyway, they've got Sydney back. They burn her soles of her feet, and you think like, God, she must be in so much distress now. She's attempted to escape and she can't. You know, her friend is gone. They've burnt her feet. All of this stuff. And I'm not saying... So they roll her into her room again on a wheelchair. And she comes in this, very... It's like a very resigned thing. And she acts that well. But my problem was... I was like, this is one of those moments where you could actually have her just going like a little bit insane for a minute but you haven't taken the opportunity. So again, you've just got the whole time. It's just and all this horrific thing is stuff is happening, but there's no.
That's why the movie is completely ineffectual.
Yeah, it's very just flat.
It was flat. Like I said, the grievances at the beginning when I read the notes, it's just same thing you've seen 100 times, done worse. No character development, no build up, no tension, no real horror. Just bland. And I'm really just more shocked at the fact that you said you'd be happy to watch this movie again.
I didn't say I'd be happy.
I'd never watch this movie again because, like I said, this movie has been done several times way better. And what's more kind of disappointing is finding out that Sydney Sweeney, this was like a passion project of hers, where I think she was going for this movie at 17, then it didn't 10 happen. Years
later, she ended up producing, finding financing, blah blah blah.
So if she's producing and financing and all that, well, we haven't even mentioned that, have we? So I don't know why you're blah blah blahing, but this isn't the Karin show. And so I just thought on that level there might be something more to it because she's gone so far to go and get this thing made.
Yeah. And
maybe it's director's fault, maybe it's right. But either way, it's just another movie where I could tick off the list where whoever wrote and directed this, it's just not as good as me either. So that's one positive watching all these new movies is that I've got something that's just going to annihilate everybody. And I'm going to start making the videos about why I'm going to annihilate everybody because at the moment it's not that hard. But people are going to struggle to reach the levels I've reached with Heathen. 3.5 hours worth of material. Not everyone can write a 3.5 hour horror epic or a 3.5 hour movie of anything. I've got that, and it's all stuff that you haven't seen before. Not all of it, but there's a lot of things in here which have never been on screen before. And if they haven't been on screen in horror, then they wouldn't have been on screen in anything because they wouldn't belong in any other genre. So yeah, once again, watching these modern movies is something that I kind of stay away from because I'm yet to be impressed. And all the ones that people say, oh, maybe you like this or you like this, or the ones that are kind of thrown in your face, this is amazing, this is a 100 out of 100 movie, they all just fall completely flat for me.
It's so disappointing.
This is the worst time I can think of it in cinema history. There's just nothing good coming out on any genre. Think about all those terrible comedies that have come out. I also have the greatest comedy of probably the past 25 years as well. And again, am I lying? I've actually got footage of you when we first got together, and considering that the movie is based on the rock band Steel Panther, in case anyone knows who they are, we've actually spoken to some members of Steel Panther about the movie. We'll get into that another time. But you had no idea what Steel Panther was. You don't get any of the in-jokes or anything like that. And you're sitting there at the computer and you can barely breathe because of the hilarity that I'm bringing. And I'm got the exact same thing with horror. I've got the greatest horror of probably the past 25, 30 years and easily the greatest comedy. And I just scratch my head as how are there just no good writers out there. The storytelling is the really terrible thing about all three of these movies, and it's the running theme through all modern horror. And but if you don't have a story in the first place, then the rest of it is completely irrelevant. In Heathen, we've got characters that you can completely invest in, a world that you can invest in, because you're going to see them for a long time for a movie. It's not just like, oh, here's Bob and here's Sally. I've got the death-dealing mortal. Characters with names like that, new Pinhead style kind of people, not just Bob and Sally. I'm sick of Bob and Sally. I don't care about Bob and Sally going into the woods and being hunted by, some guy in some piss poor mask. That's been done. It's been done.
The thing is as well,
I've got the Lord of the Rings, the Godfather of horror. It's a saga. It's a saga.
The thing is with this as well,
and horror deserves a saga.
Yes.
It deserves a 3.5 hour epic. Back to the Karin show.
Well, it makes a nice change from the Johnny show.
No, the Johnny show is through the roof in ratings.
I
ain't got nipples to show you.
I was going to say that...
well, I do have nipples, but
pretty much all the movies that we review in all of our episodes of I Know What You Watched Last Week are first-time watches for me.
Mm-hmm. As were all these, yeah.
Yeah. And I know we've sat here and we've talked about how crappy these are, and I know there's a lot of people out there, probably even some watching this, who really liked some of these movies.
No one likes Bloodline Killer.
And
surely.
Well, no, but I know Longlegs and Immaculate have good reviews. You've said so yourself.
100 out of 100.
But I'm I'm not going into these hoping to hate them. I'm going in hoping to really like them, because there are loads of movies that I've never seen before that we've reviewed, which have been absolutely mind-blowingly great. You know, from the 80s or from the noughties or whenever they're
70s,
from.
60s.
And you know, you go into all of them hoping that you're going to watch a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone goes into watching a film hoping it's going to be shit.
But
do
especially
they?
when I put on a horror, I'm like, I want to be scared. I want to be thinking at the end of this movie. I want this, that, and the other, and just none of them do that.
And again, like, I'm going to compare this Immaculate directly to Benedetta, which we've reviewed in one of our previous episodes, and it was a first time watch, and that one's quite newish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 2023, 2022.
So so it's a pretty new one. And
Paul Verhoeven, though.
And there are things in that which I've never seen before.
Absolutely. Loads of things I haven't seen before, actually.
And you might not even like it, but I guarantee you will not be bored.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is one of the biggest sins in a film. If you're sat there just not really caring either way, if you come away from a film and you're like,
Yeah,
to me is worse.
After watching these 3 movies this week,
yeah,
when it was finished, I just kind of got up and went to the kitchen and, you know, got myself a glass of water or, you know, peeled a pomegranate with it. I was like, okay, that's over now.
Well,
It means nothing.
When we were sat watching them the whole time, I was like...
A couple of
is
times,
something gonna
I actually
happen?
pressed the remote to see how long was going to be left, and I hardly ever... I try not to do that, because I want to be completely invested in the movie, but the movie
They have
makers
to
out there,
make
they're making it hard for me.
interested.
They're making it super hard for me to do that.
It's a shame.
Nigh on impossible. And yeah, we even prefaced it at the beginning of this saying, look, we didn't start doing this on the side to start trashing movies, and we don't trash every movie because when a movie's good. In fact, the best horror movie of 2024 for me is Book of the Witch, for obvious reasons if you go back and watch our review of it. And that's not a perfect movie or anything like that, but at least it's trying, and you know, it has no resources whatsoever, and they still did better than everybody else. I came away from that thinking that, okay, knowing what I know, they've done this incredibly well, this incredibly well, this incredibly well, this incredibly well. I don't get anything which is incredibly well done from any of these. Nothing stands out.
To be fair, when I think about it, that probably is the point with Immaculate again. The only thing I had heard about it was Sydney Sweeney nipples. So
What?
yeah, that's all I knew. Sydney Sweeney gets her boobs out.
So that
She
was
doesn't
the big
really.
that was the
But
big selling point of the movie.
That was the only thing I knew about it, like I said, apart from none. And if that's all that people are talking about, then that kind of goes to show that it's not a great movie, doesn't
Was it just a bunch of dudes that went to go and see it then, I suppose?
Well, it's Sydney Sweeney and the Promise of Nipples, so yeah, it could very well be a bunch of men.
So if you were dragged into this movie on the promise of nip, then you're kind of going to be disappointed, I guess, still.
This is what I said, so we're part of the, Monster Fam, I am especially, part of Monster Fam on Discord, and after watching this film, first thing I wrote on there was, a bit disappointed in it. There was a lot less booby than I was promised.
So you were hoping for the
I was hoping
boobies,
to see.
yeah.
I've heard so much about Sydney's boobs. I was like, I kind of want to see them.
Well, we'll remedy that. You've got a great pair, and I'm going to be getting them out in Heathen. So if that's not a reason to watch, I don't know what is. And like I said, it's not going to be for no reason either, like the sex scene in Bloodline Killer.
Now, just picture if we could get a scene with me and Sydney together
Now,
and actually get
to be fair,
both our tits out.
Now that you mention it, I was like, can as much as I loathe remakes, can I remake Bound with you and Sydney Sweeney now? Or do a Bound type movie, because I'd write the shit out of that.
Or what's that one with
There's no point in remaking Bound because it's perfect. That is 100 out of 100 movie.
Yeah, Cruel Intentions, is that one I'm thinking of?
Yeah, but Amazon recently did that as a TV show, and apparently it really sucks. I can believe it.
I'm
does
a bit
suck.
old for that role anyway. They're supposed to be quite young, aren't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, never mind. Yeah, so if you want to watch it for a bit of, nip through some wet cotton,
I barely even remember that bit.
You get plenty of that. Well, it's not even just her, but she's also, well, yeah, when she's like pregnant and floating in the pool, you see a lot of like nip. But yeah, as someone who went into this thinking, oh, I'm going to get to see a great pair of tits, I was severely disappointed.
I don't always watch movies just to see breasts, because fortunately I've seen enough breast in my real life that I don't have to look for it in movies. So hurrah for me.
No, hooray for boobies, Bloodhound Gang.
Hooray for boobies! superb. That's a 10 out of 10 album.
Now, on that note, I think we're pretty much wrapping it up for this week.
So 3 movies that just elicited no response from either of us really, apart from frustration and
disappointment.
Just this again, and just baffling endings.
And a couple of good laughs, but not intentional.
But let me tell you that those Gaudijo twins, they're pretty special boys. They're some pretty special boys.
Yeah, little boy.